Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Rhea.
Welcome to Karma's My Bitch, a podcast about love,
sex,
connection,
abundance,
joy,
purpose,
peace,
and how life isn't simply the stories we tell ourselves. So going from no episodes about sex in a season, we've gone to many episodes about sex in a season. Apart from last episode, which one of the most recent episodes where I thought it was about sex and it ended up not being about sex at all.
But the world will end.
Yeah. So
have all the sex you can. How about that?
Basically.
So yeah.
Basically.
Kinda.
So what is this episode about that's different from the others?
We had delineated this particular season as first 12. Which were all sort of, again, the first episodes are always the foundational episodes.
Okay.
And we just shove as much information as we can, which is usually sort of the spiritual perspective or lens on whatever the topic is. In this respect, it was like relationships, marriage, dating, sex.
Okay.
And now these 8 episodes, not that I've read through them since I channeled them all those months ago, have to do with elevating it even more.
Okay.
Taking all those subjects, and as much as we were able to elevate then based on the topic, this is I think it's the extra.
Okay.
Hence the take the grind and bring it up.
Okay, so we're taking sex and we're elevating it even further.
Yes.
From all the stuff we've said before.
Yes.
Which is that sex is oneness, sex is power.
Transcendence.
Free to fuck whoever you want, whenever you want.
Yes.
But that has to be up to you.
Yeah.
all the stuff we were talking about being a sexual, not libertarian. I can't remember. There was a phrase we used.
Oh, was there?
Yeah, for free and sex, but I can't remember what it was.
Oh.
So this is a more elevated version of that. I'm into it.
Yeah. So I think it's effectively sex in higher consciousness. Right?
Okay.
Where does that, where do we stand with that? Can you still have slutty sex and be in higher consciousness?
Okay, all right. Oh, I've wondered this. So, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
right? Where does all of that sort of fall? And, are love and sex mutually exclusive? And,
are they? Let's start there.
Where do random sex encounters fall within that consciousness spectrum? There has been a notion, and I've seen with the influencers on social media talk about how, sex is an energy exchange.
Okay,
right?
Fine. Yeah.
Okay, fine. I mean, it is to
Is
a
it?
degree, but it's not.
Okay.
It is to a degree. We'd be lying if we said it's not at all, right? Because two people coming together in the act of sex, it can be quite an energy exchange.
Well,
right?
could you have an energy exchange if two people were just talking really intimately?
Yeah, absolutely.
So could it be a similar energy exchange?
Yeah.
Fine.
No, when it's physical like that, involving penetration, et cetera, it's different.
I love how you say yeah because that's what you think, and then you check.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
You're
And then I'm like, ugh, and I'm like, Liz, why do you even? Why don't you just? I wish I could just turn my brain off.
I know what you mean.
Anyway, but when we talk about it in that respect, it's kind of like old school new age shit.
Well, I remember someone saying to me, quite a few people saying to me at different points when they were listening to our stance on sex, oh, but if you're giving away your energy, it's going to drain you. Or also they were saying things when there's a lot of stuff, and again, I don't know much about it, but I think there's a yogic or tantric, thing about men not ejaculating because then that way they're not giving away their seed, therefore they're not giving away their energy. So I did think to myself,
that sounds painful.
I don't know. Apparently it's doable.
Yeah.
But
Sting talked about that.
Yeah. But I always thought to myself, it didn't quite make sense to me because to have sex with someone actually tends to, even unless you're doing it and it doesn't feel right to you before you start, which means you're going to feel icky afterwards, usually. Mm-hmm. I tend to feel more beyond, I don't know if that's what's the word I'm looking for. It tend to feel more peppy afterwards, So I was it kind of feels the opposite of draining my energy. It feels like it moves things through. Mm-hmm. That's been my experience.
Right. Back in the day when that was a popular idea, right? That sort of energy exchange that drains us. I mean, it's true in the sense that sleeping around helps us when we're in the thick of our karma, right? Usually it's the opposite of a solution.
When you're constantly feeling not good enough, and so you're looking to strangers or people to validate your story by, well, if they sleep with me, I'm good enough, let's say, or if I'm in my power, I'm good enough, or fuck you, I'm going to be super self-sabotagey, so I'm going to sleep around. Whatever it is, whatever the reason is, you end up reliving that not good enough story.
Yeah.
But when you're out of your not good enough story, and in this instance, we're talking about, I guess, what you said, higher consciousness, or so effectively you're karmaless, egoless, fearless, and you're just living in harmony with yourself, right? Which is
Yeah.
another word for it, I guess.
Yes.
You're connected to your heart and you allow things to unfold the way that they're written, which you are helping write. And I don't need to go into it more. There are many seasons where we get super esoteric, and I'm not going to do it in this one. So then I guess it's different because you're not coming from a place of lack. You're not coming from a place of fix me, help me, save me.
Exactly.
It's just, I'm alive.
Yeah. So the more we hold on to that idea that it can drain us or it's not healthy, it just keeps us in separation from the one thing that actually allows us to experience our power.
The one thing.
It's one of the things,
Yeah.
I should say. Well, one of the things, one of the essential things that helps keep us in our power.
Why would we not have sex if we wanted to? Because it's wrong. Because it's bad.
Yeah.
Because it's dirty.
Well, also, it's a bit like we're not in an age where stemming our desires is helpful. Full stop.
Yeah.
It's more damaging than anything else, right? And again, that's not the same as acting on impulse. Those are two very distinct things. Impulse behavior has a lot to do with like, I can't sit still because I'm trying to avoid something. Yeah.
Desires is, I just sat still, but now I've gotten up because I really want this.
Exactly. I'm very clear. Again, that comes back to the clarity, you know? And so clarity is where we can be really conscious of our choices. So we know where they come from.
Even if you're in your car, you'd be like, okay, so I'm not feeling good enough. I don't feel very comfortable in this arena. I'm doing this to get more practice. I'm doing this to experience something different. I'm doing this because it feels right to do it. And again, even I'm doing this because I want to, even if it is that impulse behavior that we're not drawing the line for you. You do what you want to do until you realize you don't want to do it, whatever it is. Right?
I mean, sometimes that's how we come into consciousness.
Exactly. That's how you unravel it.
Yeah.
But it's just about being honest with oneself about why you're doing something.
Yeah.
That's actually the only requirement that really is there, or honest enough as best as you can be. So it could just be, I really like this guy, or he turns me on, or I'm just using he because I'm talking about myself. Or I can't explain it, but I feel like I need to do this, or I'm bored. But whatever it is, as long as you're honest with oneself about it, it allows you to actually get what you get from that interaction. Because if you're feeling you want to, there's going to be a reason.
Absolutely.
So at least if you're honest about what that is before, and it could turn out to be different when it's done, then you're learning what you're meant to learn from it, and you're gleaning all the experiences and wisdom that you can. And I guess from your words, you can have an eternity in it, because effectively you will grow and change from that experience because you're allowing yourself to.
Yes, a single sexual encounter can actually be an eternity. It can be that powerful that it could help us evolve. And that's really important. And that's beautiful.
Do you think
Super
I've
cool.
had one?
I'm sure you've had multiple eternities, right? But we'll never know or understand what drives our desires until we're really conscious beings, right? And when we are there and we understand it is when we can really grow as people. And it might be really difficult to get our heads around because of the way in which we approach sex is so limiting and still so rules-based. You know, you can't have it, you know, what's the appropriate age to start having sex? What's the appropriate time to have sex after you've met somebody? One-night stands are still, you know, they're more acceptable than before, but still less so, right? They're still judged.
And that's partly, I believe, two reasons. One, from the people who wish they were doing what she was doing, wish they could also be in their power, and so they judge her for it because they feel lacking in themselves. But maybe they're not wanting to give themselves permission, so they don't want to be in permission. You know what I mean? Or two, because when you spent so much of your life telling yourself that something's wrong and bad, and it can only be done in certain ways and in certain limitations, the idea that there could be anything outside of that just really is jarring.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, that discrepancy between that dissonance between what we think we understand, even if we're very open-minded people, and where our values lie, there's still often a massive gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But when you say we can understand, like we can be clearer on our intentions and all the stuff you just said.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
I'm not sure whether I've ever really understood why I'm doing something until it's done. I've never been like, I mean, I'll have ideas, and when we were discussing this yesterday, I'll have an idea, I'll have an inkling, I'll kind of know where things will go. I'll have maybe more of a vague, blurry vision of whether it's going to be a fun or not so fun experience. But why exactly I'm doing this and where I'll land at the end of it, I can usually not tell.
Isn't that part of the fun, though?
No, it is, but that's why I was confused when you said when we're truly conscious beings, we can, but I'm just not sure how that works.
Yeah, but you didn't enter, most people aren't entering or beginning their sexual lives as conscious beings.
I see.
Right? So if you can imagine, it really is for like younger generations as they come up, if they've been able to maintain their full-bodied consciousness and possibly have higher consciousness, that's where you're going to see it be different from what we think.
And what does that different look like?
Again, it won't necessarily be, interestingly enough, about who is in love with whom. A lot of that is what confuses people. Like, I shouldn't have, it's the shouldn'ts. Like, I should save myself. I shouldn't, I've got to make sure that this is special. Or it's, we have all those stories that we wrap up within our sexual encounters, whichever spectrum. I mean, it could be like the super quote unquote dirty ones or the more relationship-y type encounters, right? But whatever those are, they're all there because we're wired. So whatever it is, there's still a story attached. There's still an expectation attached. There's still conditions and there's still expectations. And so what we're going to see later is that, again, it's not going to be the super casualness of sex as we perceive it. Certain cultures, it's kind of like, again, blowing your nose or, you know what I mean? It's like, whatever. It's just sort of a bodily function I've just got to go take care of. With that basis, a very transactional kind of dynamic that occurs. It's just going to be I'm so in tune with my body and I know what my body needs at this moment that, I'm going to go and do it.
But could that be with anyone?
Yes and no. It'll be with our energetic match, right?
See, you've said this to me before, and I don't think I understand energetic matching. And I don't think we've really spoken about it on a podcast, so I'm very interested in this. Can we explain this topic in more detail? What do you mean by that?
An energetic match, for the best we can phrase it, because it's more something that you intuit or feel versus what you would know. So it's not as if you're never going to find your energetic match on an app in the sense that, oh my God, that person, like I vibe. An energetic match is when you feel, which is why one-on-one, like I've met you at a place, you're going to know that.
But you could also meet someone on an app and then they're in a room with you like, oh wow.
Yes, exactly.
But
we're just saying that you will not
know.
No, you're not going to be able to tell through a screen.
That's what you mean.
So that's your energetic match. It's just somebody that you feel this, that you can vibe with.
And where does that come from? Is it just we're on the same vibration? How?
Yeah. Vibrationally, we fit enough.
And what is enough? Like
as
with someone
we can turn each other on. Something there is turned on. When I'm in your presence, I feel enough of a connection. Like we're vibing on some level and it's through our bodies, right? Mental, emotional, spiritual, physical. Something's vibing that I feel something there. That's it. Now, can one person feel it and not the other? Yes. That other person could be that insensitive to vibes and feelings because they could just be existing in a vacuum of their own thoughts, in their own world.
But if you vibe, both people vibe.
Yeah.
So even if only one feels it, you're both vibing. And
yes.
What does it mean to vibe with someone? Does it mean that you're like of similar consciousness?
No, not necessarily. Again, it's just you're somehow connecting through. Like, do you ever have just like a super cool conversation with somebody? Maybe you would have never encountered them just because you run in different circles, but somehow, you ended up in the same room at this particular hour and it was just really awesome. Like you were just intellectually connected.
Okay, fine.
And finding that basis point where you're both connecting. And did you ever notice how much sexier they become? You're like, oh my God.
I can't really remember, but maybe. I'm like, okay.
You're like, okay, yes.
Yeah, okay, fine.
It's like
So actually finding people like that are quite few and far between. Finding people who you can vibe with and therefore have sex with.
We wouldn't say few and far between, but it isn't as common as like something you're going to necessarily find on like every Friday night you go out. Either.
Can you call that magic it, fate it, whatever the word is?
No, it really isn't like that. I mean, because when you're really on your game, as in when you're in that sort of conscious space, like you are full-bodied consciousness or higher, you may not, yes, once you have it, it doesn't go away, but your optimal time in which you're experiencing it and to really fully embodying all of that may not be every Friday night. It might be on a Wednesday night. It might be on a Thursday morning. We all operate in very different ways at very different times. Our optimal hours for sleep, for sex, for eating, like they're all different hours. We've just all conformed to this kind of schedule this because of separation.
Wow.
Right? Some people might just be at their best at 2 a.m., but the rest of the world is asleep because we've been told that that's when you sleep.
Yeah.
Right?
So then how do you know the kind of people you should be sleeping with, but what, I don't know how to ask this question.
How do you discern who the...
Well, then how do you discern between the people who would have who would have an enjoyable encounter with and the ones you wouldn't maybe necessarily?
Experience will tell you that, first of all, right? Well, there's the mutual respect, right? And again, that's not a friends with benefits thing. It's the respect, I'll treat this interaction with respect. But I feel enough of a connection that there's a mutual respect, and it's with respect that I will treat this interaction as one of the most important I am currently having.
So basically, even though I'm not in love with you, we're in the room together and you're all I'm focused on right now.
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah.
I found that so interesting. Mm-hmm. I'm present with you, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not thinking about fucking someone else or what I have to do tomorrow or what I'm doing in an hour. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to enjoy this moment.
Yeah. Or who I'm hanging out with after.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And what are the other ways?
Well, there's an intense vibe. I'm feeling it. You're feeling it.
Or
we're all feeling it.
Or I'm feeling it and you're so insensitive you haven't noticed it. Or you're feeling it and I'm so insensitive I haven't noticed it.
There you go. But if we're both feeling it, then we're on and we're going to explode if we don't do it. So let's just go do it now and then see where it takes us, right? Until it feels right for both of us. But it could be that one of us catches feelings. Or both of us catches feelings or both of us catch feelings and then we just go on our merry way and see where it takes us.
So like a relationship could start with a bang, basically.
Yeah. That sounds cool. Or one of us does. But rather than if we're conscious or in higher consciousness, the moment I start realizing that I've caught feelings, I'm going to say something. I'm going to keep this relationship in integrity by keeping myself in integrity. But what's really important about that is that there are no ulterior motives. Because that's the issue with a lot of these types of sexual hookups and connections that people are creating for themselves, is that there are a lot more ulterior motives than anyone's willing to fess up to.
Interesting. What are they?
I actually really want a relationship, but I don't seem to be having that right now, so I'm going to have sex. But the risk of that, when you are in your karma, is the fact that it's just going to bring up more shit.
And if you're not in your karma, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't necessarily matter. It could just feel like settling. Somehow the ick gets developed.
Quickly, so you just cycle through many men.
It could be. You don't, who knows? But that's what can happen, right?
But then what about if you've kind of been hanging out with someone and you're liking everything you're seeing with them and you're like, actually, yeah, I just want to explore this physically.
Yeah. And so when you're at that place, it comes from a place of elevated intention, right? And so that's more of a furthering intimacy thing.
But it's still on its way to relationship. Maybe, maybe not.
No, not necessarily. It's probably the closest thing you would get to a friends with benefits scenario without that person being your friend.
Okay, so none of these the person's your friend.
No, as we said in the previous episode this season, FWBs are really not the ideal scenario that a lot of people seem to think they are. You're taking a relationship out of integrity, and you'll never have that relationship back, no matter what you tell yourself.
But in all the things that we just discussed, you could be with someone as a friend and talking, you get really intimate, and all of a sudden you wanted to jump each other's bones, and then, as you said, to keep the relationship in integrity, if feelings all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, we're friends, but I really fancy you. If you keep the relationship in integrity by saying something, you also allow the relationship to evolve. And actually that's just as valid. But it's about pretending that you've got one thing when you want another.
Yeah. And maybe it's because that person is in a relationship, or you just know for some reason maybe you're not their type. So you know that deep down it won't go anywhere. In which case, in that sort of unrequited love scenario, you don't necessarily have to fess up, but you also don't go around coveting a relationship with them and then sacrificing what you really want because you're crushing on them so hard, and then you're just waiting for them.
Yeah. But again, at the same time, you just do you, because wherever you go, wherever you feel, wherever your heart leads you, we're not going to be accurately predicting every single one of our listeners' relationships.
No, not at all.
So
not at all.
if you're listening to this and you'll think, actually, no, that's exactly what I want to do, fucking do it. Because you might find out, that it was, I'm not preaching the, it's not you, it's me until it's the one, whatever that fucking phrase is. I'm just saying if you feel called to do something, there's always a reason, karmic or otherwise.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And listening to it means you'll either get more out of your karma or figure out what that otherwise is. And in neither way, you lose anything. You only gain more experience and evolution.
Yeah. So this is like...
Because that's the thing, because there are no... Huh?
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, because there aren't really, sex is it's a very policed arena, but it's just another arena in some respects where the same rules apply. It's just more obvious when it comes to sex. But we all have been imposed on these structures and rules and values and all these things about what we should, how we should be behaving and with who and why, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, we've had a lot of episodes. We've talked about cheating. We've talked about all this stuff. We've kind of tried to widen the lens a bit and be like, it might not feel good. It might not be necessarily what you'd like, but can you see there's always a reason? And I feel like that's kind of the same with sex in the sense that there aren't really any rules aside from the ones that you believe and choose to be rules.
Well, those become guidelines, right?
Yeah. But I don't even mean that. I just mean that if you do what you feel, you'll always find out why. And finding out why will allow you to not only have more information, but become a wiser version of yourself. That's it. That's basically my point. I don't know. That was my point. Because this was the other thing. I remember in the previous season, we were discussing how with sex, when you're in higher consciousness, actually guidance offered intimacy as an option for kind of making that feel better because it can get quite icky.
Yeah.
If you're just sleeping around, icky in yourself, if you're just sleeping around not really feeling very satisfied, right?
Right.
And they were saying intimacy actually elevates that. But that's again, people can make that into a rule, but it's not a fucking rule. If you're trying to force intimacy, you're just going to come across needy and everything's going to feel even less intimate.
Prescription-y too.
Yeah.
You know?
You know what I mean? That's the thing about when we talk about higher consciousness, which I would just term, as I said previously, it's just being in total harmony with oneself and just honoring that. It's not even a rule. There are guidelines because, I might think one thing for months and then in one day, everything could change. Be like, oh, I was wrong about that. Actually this, but I have to be able to give myself permission to find that out. And have that humility, right? But at the same time, there are certain things that will never budge for me. And for me, those keep me in integrity, which is I respect myself and I respect you, right? I won't ghost you. I'll try and be kind or whatever, but I also still put myself first in many ways, right? Anyway, whatever. The respect one is mine personally.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever it is, it's respect. Because if I'm treating someone else without respect, then I'm not in integrity. But everything else, fucking up for grabs.
Yeah.
And I'm only talking about the people in my interaction. I'm not even talking about the people outside of that. Right.
And also sort of what you're talking about in terms of just sort of seeing where things lead is that the more experiences we have, the more expanded we become. Because one of the things that, we've been experiencing, or I've actually, as we evolve into a more harmonious relationship paradigm, if you will, or just killing all paradigms and seeing where we land, sex is still one of the most limited, narrow experiences we have because of all the parameters and boundaries that have been set up around it. But if we are...
I just think sometimes if you just think of sex, if you were just an alien without sex and you got plopped onto this earth plane and you looked at two people having sex, you'd be like, what the fuck are they doing? I just sometimes wonder, the first man and the first woman staring at each other, being like, let's do this. And then she got pregnant. Do you think they thought, what the fuck are we doing and what the fuck is happening? Or do you think you just look at animals, you're somehow they figure it out and they always know it's natural? I've always wondered that.
Yeah, guidance is no, we're not going to go there.
I know, but I just find it really interesting. It's just when you want to kiss someone on the lips, who decided that was a thing?
I've actually wondered that though, as I write my books and I've written enough kissing scenes and I'm like, whoever thought that kissing was just hot or stimulating enough.
But it is.
Yeah.
When I'm with someone and I care about them, I want to kiss them. But what is that? But I've
how
also
much
learned,
of this is like I've gotten from media versus like what feels natural.
And then you kiss someone
I don't
who you
know.
think, oh my God, I'm so attracted to. And then like, it's literally like kissing a wet sponge. Okay. Or you kiss someone who you're not that attracted to, or you somehow like were drawn to, but you didn't expect. And that kiss is like electric.
Yeah.
So weird. I don't know. I find
it is. No,
weird.
trust me. I've pondered the same thing.
But I guess that's what you mean by like, we keep expanding.
Yeah.
Because every encounter you have with anyone gives you a new dimension of life.
Yeah. And to yourself. It's too cliche to say self-knowledge, right? It's bigger than that. Because it's not just self-knowledge in terms of self-awareness, but it's also just the knowledge of where you are in the grand scheme of it all. Because when you experience yourself with another person, you cannot help but see yourself differently. You cannot help but see where you occupy.
What?
No, you just effectively experience your divinity, okay? Fine. Make me say it. But it gets felt differently by different people, right? I'm not going to mental body this.
No, I mean, I want to mental body everything. The flip side of that is, let's say you go back and sleep with someone who you used to sleep with 10 years ago, and you settle into the same rhythm you had 10 years ago. You're going to feel a little bit like, wait, I'm bigger than this now. I'm not the person who had sex the way I did 10 years ago. So why am I doing it again?
How much more adventurous have you become?
No, but you know what I mean? Like, even like the way you connect, don't connect in the same way, or you can feel a wall in a different way. It feels different because you're different.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like how you can't go back. And even if you have everyone come back into your life over and over again, all those relationships will always look a bit different because you're different. Sex is one of those things. If the other person hasn't changed, you can't be that different self in that interaction. And I just find it really interesting because it's a great way of seeing who you have become. And I'm not saying let's all go out and sleep with our exes to see how great we are now. We said it this in the book, that how it was a barometer. Sex is a barometer to your karma. But in a way, I feel it's also just, you can really see how comfortable you are with yourself.
Oh,
how comfortable the other person is with themselves, how the energy flows between you. When you talk about energetic match, it's like, maybe you might not feel it straight away, but once you're having sex, you can see whether or not you match. It's pretty fucking obvious, pretty fucking quick, because either it flows or it doesn't.
It's pretty much that's the litmus test.
Yeah. And also, you can learn so much about someone in a very limited time by having sex with them, you know?
Yeah, that and traveling with them.
Yeah, how they control stuff, how chill they are, how much they care about their pleasure, how much they care about your pleasure, how selfish they are, how nervous they are, how engaged they are. You know, I'm not going to be able to give you the reasons why they do what they do, and it could all be perfectly valid or not valid or whatever. No idea. Every situation is different. But you can kind of see where someone's at.
What we're effectively expanding to, and we've talked about how sex is transcendent, right?
Yeah, but I didn't understand where we were going.
What we're expanding to is our divinity, but to experience it to the point where we don't fall out. Because while it was, again, a way in which we could sort of connect to our divine selves, right? That wouldn't last very long. Pretty much once that lost that dopamine effect, life would go on and it would be fairly shitty or whatever. But
and you'd be like, oh, I haven't had sex for ages. Oh no, fuck, I had it on Monday. But you just forgot it because you'd fallen out of it already.
Exactly. But when you're doing it from a conscious place and you're really giving yourself permission, which when you give yourself permission is a sign of empowerment. And when you're doing that, just from the very act of being able to make the choice and follow through on that choice is not only how you begin to be your most powerful, but you can maintain that power. What we're effectively, this is your favorite word. So we're expanding to love.
The more you have sex.
From a conscious place, as a conscious being without karma.
The more great you think you are.
No, the more in your divinity you are.
Okay, could just explain it.
Yeah. So again, as we said, from the moment in which you are empowered enough to make a choice and see it through, and where you're just that connected to yourself that you know this is the best thing for me in this moment. And through a sexual encounter or experience in those eternities that we talked about, you are coming into love. I've been feeling this way for a while. Maybe I didn't understand it, or maybe I did, but I didn't think myself in a position, whatever. But in that moment that you make that decision and you follow through on that choice. And you know what is best for you. And again, you're kind of looking at those 3 scenarios. Here's somebody who's a great match for me. We vibe, we fit, and you're coming from that conscious place. You're effectively expanding into love.
Because you're listening to yourself and you're allowing your light to be, you're listening to your light and allowing it to flow out of you and connect to someone else.
Yeah, exactly. Because it allows for that connection to our divinity that is so powerful that it can become transcendent. And that's really where our power is.
Because I know what I can do. I know I will own my desire and follow through. And that's going to make me feel amazing.
Yeah, and I have my back. So what we're effectively transcending as we do this is our small limiting selves, which tells us, well, we should only have sex after 5 dates.
Should only have sex with our husbands or wives. Should only have sex if they bought us dinner.
Yeah. And this isn't, again...
We've exchanged more than 3 words with them.
Yeah. And again, this isn't meant to be confused with only certain people should just be giving it away, or, you know, everyone's out there having sex and then therefore that's bad for like human reproduction or whatever. I'm like, but when you're really conscious, you're going to know what's right for you.
You're just going to feel an urge to say yes and you're just going to say it.
Yeah.
And that's how a one night stand can change your life.
Exactly. Thank you for listening. For more information, articles, and inspiration, find us at karmasmybitch.com and at karmasmybitch.insta.
And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review.